Sugawa was congratulated on the amount of hard work he'd been doing. He was told to check the documents for the project that she would give to him by a beautiful young lady. Her name was Tokimori-Mizuki, and someone called to her as she handed him the documents. They asked her to do the revision and she confidently said that she would take care of it with a smile. Taking her seat beside the gentleman, she also reminded him to please print a copy. Soon, it was done and they pressed the enter button. Their other colleague was overjoyed at their speed and excellence. She had known that her senior would be a lifesaver. She also told their male colleague to not just stand there staring but to also watch and learn, and he nervously agreed. The lady worker was congratulated and told that the presentation was loved. She was beautiful, smart, and hardworking. To be honest, she was just so radiant. None of the people who gushed and blushed at her would ever believe that she was a different person at home. Later that night, our dude from earlier stumbled upon that perfect and beautiful lady passed out and sleeping on the floor, still in her work clothes. No one would believe that she was like this when she returned home. The lady opened her eyes and welcomed him home, and his cheeks flushed at how pretty she was. He was living together with his colleague from the office. The bath was ready and he called to her that he also left her a change of clothes. She responded with a soft grunt. Our dude, Sugawa Toru, lost his home, and his colleague, Tokimori-san, was letting him stay here as her helper. Soon, he realized that she was perfect when it came to work, but in everything else, she was super useless. He happened to be the only person who knew of this side of her. She called to him suddenly, gently tugging at his clothes as he cooked. Rubbing gently at her eyes, she asked if she could ask him a favor and he gasped. His eyes focused on her melons peeking out of her shirt. She asked for him to undo his buttons and his brain shut down. She even asked for him to do these things, and as he reached out to help her, she mumbled about only using buttonless clothes. He reached to undo the first button and froze as he realized that he was entering dangerous territory. He knew that she had no intention of seducing him, but even so, he could not stop thinking about weird things as he slowly undid the buttons of her shirt. Soon her entire front was exposed and he told himself that he had to stop. Suddenly, she pressed a small peck on his cheek and his face flushed in alarm. Smiling, she thanked him, and then stumbled away happily while our dude was left shocked and speechless. He gasped in alarm, wondering what that was. He could not believe that she kissed him and wondered if she thought of him in that way. It could not be. He thought that he was being too pretentious, and he was just a simple helper. An hour later, he wondered why she was taking so much time in the bathroom. He knocked on the door and peeked in, asking if she was all right. But he screamed when he saw that she had passed out on the cold floor and had continued her napping there. She laughed about how she was going to enter the bath, but she suddenly got sleepy. He yelled at her to at least wear something, and that he will help her. Later, she was curled in bed and he asked if everything was all right. She was already slipping away, and she mumbled that she was sorry for being useless and asked if he was disappointed. He patted her gently and smiled that he was not bothered at all. She always worked so hard at the office that she needed to get some rest. Her cheeks pinked and he told her to have a good sleep. Suddenly, she asked if there was someone that he liked and his cheeks pinked really fast as he asked why she asked such a question. She confessed that she was unsure and said that she would see him tomorrow. Her defenselessness always surprised him. A couple of days before that event, it was 7:30 in the morning, and our dude's day had begun inside a capsule hotel. 3 days earlier, his landlady had apologized and told him that his apartment would be demolished very soon, which had been shocking to him. After moving out, he had to put his things in a trunk room. But looking for a room was kind of expensive because of the initial cost of renting, which was expensive everywhere. He then heard that his younger sibling had made it into college after he paid the entrance fee. He told them that they could ask him for help whenever they needed it, but he was the one that needed help now. Moving out was really expensive, and he figured that he would figure things out one way or another. Suddenly, he stumbled upon an invitation to a welcome party, and recalled that a drinking party had been scheduled for that day. He figured that it was fine to go since that was the best way to distract himself from his never-ending problems. So, he went to the drinking party and chugged down some drinks. A beautiful colleague approached him and asked if he had finished his drink, and offered to order something. He hesitated with a blush and then agreed to order a lemon sour. She then happily went ahead to order. She was also greeted by many others around. Others talk and say that saying that he was at the chief's birthday party worked nice, and she also helped in a project before, and she had served them tea yesterday. They all had a word of praise for the young and masterful lady who was just so reliable. Everyone was thanked for coming, and our dude waved all of his colleagues good night. He sighed and started making his way back to the hotel. However, he froze when he realized there was someone still hanging around. His mouth fell open when he realized something else. It was the perfect and reliable Tokimori. She rubbed gently at her eye and called his name, and he asked what happened. She smiled up at him like she had not been coughing sitting on the floor outside, and laughed that her home was pretty far, so she was just taking a break. He asked if she was really okay, and she smiled that she was almost there and thanked him. He started to walk away when suddenly some dude showed up and happily squealed at her. He grabbed her hand and said that it was dangerous being by herself and that he ought to go with her. She was nervous and did not know how to reject the bold man. The man laughed and went on to say that she did not seem well, so he invited her to stay with him at a hotel. He grabbed her and tried to drag her off, but she resisted, so our guy yelled loudly. He said that she was his coworker, so it was his duty to escort her home. Her eyes lit up with relief and a blush came upon her cheeks, and the weird dude reluctantly backed off. In the end, he laughed nervously and ended up walking her home. Once they got to her place, he asked for her password, and she gave that to him easily. Suddenly, he hesitated as he recalled that it was bad to enter a woman's room, especially at night. So, he offered to take his leave now that she was home. However, he was so confused to find that the whole place was a mess when he stepped inside. He asked if she had a bed and she tiredly shook her head. She then flopped to the floor among her things and announced that she slept there because looking for furniture was tiring. This was surprising to him, and she apologized that this was how she was a sloppy woman. For a moment, our dude was speechless, then he called out to her and said that it was okay if she was like this. This was because she always gave her best, and her cheeks flushed. He looked surprised when she mumbled that somehow, he always made her feel relieved. He had helped her recover her strength, and she would start cleaning. However, as soon as she stood, she managed to slip on one of her possessions and went crashing down, much to our dude's alarm. He called out to her in concern, and then gasped when he saw her panty outline due to her raised skirt. For some reason, his gaze laser-focused and zoomed in on her underwear. She mumbled that it was useless and was already ready to give up, but he sighed. He took off his jacket and tossed it on her, saying that it was dangerous and that he would just clean it for her. She then asked about his home and if it was nearby since he was spending so much time at her place. However, he confessed that his apartment got demolished, so he now lived in a capsule hotel for a moment. She thought about it and suggested that he stay at her place, much to his shock. He gasped so loudly that her hair was blown back, and she added that if he paid half the rent, then she would give him a room. He insisted that he could not do that since he was a man, but she was confused and could not understand why he could not. She asked if she was not of any help, and he mumbled that he would be in her care just for a while, unable to resist her cute face. She smiled happily and asked if his words were real. Then she wished him a good night and once again zoomed off to sleep. He could not believe what he had gotten himself into that evening, and that was how his life as a freeloader began. They say that the way you eat is the way you are, and our dude's colleague, Tokimori, was so elegant. Many other colleagues at work were sure that she was the kind to have dinner ready before her husband got home. Some even wanted her to feed them, and that was such an old custom unfit for modern times. Our dude listened often to what people thought of her, but they could not be more wrong. In the house, he did all the cooking, and got worried whenever she entered the kitchen. Since they started living together, they only had cup ramen, and she sulked that she could not give him something in return for this afternoon's bento. He laughed that it was all right. He had seen her wearing an apron for a moment, and knew that everyone in the office would be jealous of that. He got busy making some food and was just happy that she at least tried to do it. As he worked, Tokimori watched him curiously with intense eyes and a blush came upon his cheeks. She asked him if he was making omuras and he was freaking over their eyes meeting, but he said yes. She rose and offered to do the ketchup since she wanted to help out. It was a new bottle of ketchup, so he told her to make sure to remove the lid. He happily wondered what she would write on the food with the ketchup, just for her to somehow squirt ketchup on her shirt and face. He gasped dramatically and he asked if she was okay, and that they had to wash her shirt. Then, he panicked over her undressing in front of him. He wondered if she just did that without thinking, and if that meant that she was into him. However, the weather was cold so she had to put something on. Then, she apologized to him because she kept troubling him. He called to her and said that she always did her best, so it was okay if she had moments like this. Her cheeks flushed and he got to work cleaning her shirt and was happy that it was all cleaned. He hurried to her, apologizing for keeping her waiting, but he found her fast asleep on the couch in an oversized sweater. He can see her undies peeking out and he blushes at the sight of the delicate fabric. He reaches out and shakes her awake, telling her that she will catch a cold. She goes on sleeping, so he just places a blanket on her. His face is now close to her and he is nervous about the proximity, when suddenly she rolls and happily munches on his thumb, much to his alarm. He cried out and pulled away from her in shock. She confesses that she'd been eaten omnurus in her dream, and he laughs that she must be hungry. He was also freaking out about touching her lips, which felt kind of lewd. The omnurus was also cold. The next day at work, Tokimori-san answered a call and told the person that she would see them at the meeting tomorrow. She was very self-disciplined at work and everyone admired her tight-fitted clothes as well as her reliable personality. Her body proportions were at the same level as a model to the other workers, and they gasped with joy, sure that she would work her body and muscles whenever she returned home. Another female colleague shooed the male colleagues to work and our dude said nothing about the issue. It was true that she had a very beautiful figure, and later that night, the said figure was stretched out and sleeping on the couch once more. He had never seen her do any exercise at all, and he asked if he could wash the clothes in the laundry basket, which she agreed to. He sighs and gets to work, then freezes when he sees that her underthings are at the top of the laundry. He stares in embarrassed shock and wonders if they are what he thinks they are. It truly was her underthings and he panics. He also wonders how she has enough if she keeps accumulating so much underwear. He thinks about what he should do about this, but if they were not washed, it would be troublesome. So, he pulled out his phone and researched how to wash a bra. He soon found a site that explained the steps that he could follow, but he sat and panicked again, wondering just what he was doing with his life. Once that was over, he turned the water in the tap and was ready to begin. To avoid losing its shape, it was advisable to scrub the delicate garment under the water and to rinse. However, the more he stared at it, the more all sorts of thoughts entered his head. He thought that his colleague was a much bigger cup than he had expected. The more he stared at it, he realized that it was bigger than his hand. With a blush on his face, he reached out and touched the bra again, imagining that it was her that he was touching. He touched the bra with both hands. Suddenly, she walked in and called out to him and he cried out for forgiveness with his hands clasped. She apologized about earlier and for accumulating her laundry. Suddenly, she paused and pointed out that his sleeves would get wet. She reached out and told him to stay still while she worked to help him fold them. While she did this, her melons pressed up against him and his eyes widened in horror. She said that he was fine now and his hands trembled in the sink over the bra. That was when she saw it and realized what he'd been doing. Her face pinked in realization and embarrassment. She shoved him out and screamed that she would wash the things later. Meanwhile, his mind was elsewhere. With his head in the clouds, he thought back to the sensation of her soft melons pressed up against his virgin ass, and wondered if she had been braless. Living together with her made his worldly desires never disappear. Just as they were finished work, a female colleague called out to Tokimori and invited her to grab a meal. She agrees on the spot, and asks her colleague, who is called Nishi, if she has already gone to the pasta shop in front of the station. The colleague squealed at the thought of going to a stylish shop. The male colleagues smiled that their reliable colleague knew of everything, and they wondered what hobbies she had since she seemed to have good taste. Our dude considered her hobbies for a moment. Now that he thought about it, he knew nothing of her hobbies. Another colleague talked to him and asked him if he had seen something. He looked up and the other colleague smirked cheekily. He pulled out a new move from director Asayama, and he was sure that they would love it, and he would even lend him the Blu-ray. Our dude was excited and happily begged for it. Meanwhile, his female colleague curiously watched the interaction. Our dude had gone to the cinema the day the movie came out, but it did not matter how many times he watched it. The movie was a masterpiece that would make anyone cry. He was looking forward to it, and as he set up his system, his roommate appeared. She curiously asked if he liked movies, and he panicked at her suddenly appearing behind him. He admitted that it was actually an anime movie, and he asked if she watched movies. She blushed with a nervous smile and said that she wanted to, but recently she did not have the time. Then, he offered that if she wanted to, then they could watch his movie together, and she lit up with joy. She happily skipped away to get some drinks, and he realized how rare it was to see her energetic at home. However, watching a movie with her, with them sharing the same couch, it suddenly felt somehow like a movie date, even though they were just at home. He nervously glanced at her while her entire focus was on the screen, blissfully unaware of his awkward thoughts. She felt so close, and he was nervous and unsure if he was being too conscious of her. He figured it was because the room was darker than usual, when suddenly she turned to him. She moved in closer, getting comfortable and rested on his shoulder. He panicked with his eyes widening and his blush deepening. He quickly asked if she was sleepy and she laughed that the movie was interesting, but she could not help but rub at her eyes a little. She got exhausted trying to maintain her posture at the cinema, so she could not stay like that until the movie ended. After all, it seemed like she was a bother, and he called to her. He smiled and said that they could enjoy the movie together, and that she did not have to worry about him. It was okay if she slumped a little if that was how she enjoyed the movie. She beamed with joy and agreed that they should watch it, flashing some serious thigh game that he found it hard to look away from. The more he stared, the more he realized that he could totally see between her legs. This was bad, and he could not make himself focus at all on the important things. The volume was loud and she asked him to rewind a bit. She was having fun, so he decided that it was fine, even if she crawled a little closer to him and rested her head on his lap. He gasped in shock at what she had done. He could not get enough of the faces she made. She looked up at him with a happy smile and said that as expected, he was so calm. He stared at her in confusion, but she just laughed that it was nothing. She was way too defenseless, and when watching a movie with her, he could not recall anything. An energetic junior colleague, Nishi Yukako, happily asked Tokimori if she would like to have dinner together that Friday. She was surprised and confessed that the day was no good. The junior then shouted that perhaps she had a boyfriend, and she had to remind the junior that they were at work. The male colleagues were then shocked as they considered that she actually had a boyfriend. Her skin was glossier than usual, and it felt like she was getting shinier than usual. They thought it was the power of love. However, she just planned on going back home as usual, and our dude knew the reason she had started to look so shiny. She had finally started sleeping in a bed and not on the floor, so she got a good night's rest. She called out to him then, and he raised his head to find her behind him. She shifted closer and handed him a note, confessing that she had forgotten her keys to the house and had no idea what to do. His eyes widened and he turned back to her, asking her to kindly wait for him at the station. He had typed out a message in a small box on his computer screen and her eyes widened when she saw it. Elated, she made an OK sign with her fingers and he blushed as he decoded the meaning, thinking it was very unique. He was now motivated to finish work as soon as possible. Later that night, he hurried to the train station and searched around for her. At the station, it seemed like a meeting place for a date. He was greeted as he walked inside and called out to her. Predictably, she was slumped at a table with a cup beside her sleeping head. He nervously asked if she was okay, and she mumbled that the store felt quite cool, so she ended up dozing off. He smiled in amusement that she also went into off mode while she was outside, and he apologized for keeping her waiting. It was time to go home. As they walked, he reminded her sleepy self that the stairs were quite steep, so she had to be careful. However, she was not paying attention and started to doze off, slipping on the stairs, much to his alarm. He caught her and cried for her to watch out as she fell into his arms. He just managed to stop them by digging his foot into the floor and sighed with relief. He asked if she was okay and if she was hurt. She slowly raised her head and looked up at him with big doe eyes. A flush came upon our guy immediately, his eyes focusing on her breasts and on her lips, his heart beating a mile a minute. He gulped as he stared at her, noting that her body was so thin and she was so cute. Then she called out to him. She whined that she felt like she had hurt an ankle and he gasped. He had to carefully help her and she sat on the stairs in a forlorn pose, hanging her head as she apologized for troubling him. He smiled that she could not do everything by herself and that everyone could do their best when they had someone to rely on. Her eyes shone with admiration, realizing that he was prepared to carry her on his back, and she reached out to take his hand. With a blush, she asked if she was heavy, and he laughed that she was not heavy at all. It could not be helped that her melons were pressing against his back, and he could not complain about it. Suddenly, someone called out and said that they had lost their computer pass. He paused in shock to see a familiar girl, and she also stared at him. Then, they both screamed in mixed shock and horror. It was the junior from work, and she recognized him as Sugawa Toru, and she asked why he was with Tokimori, their admired senior. The admired senior sleepily rubbed her eyes and recognized Nishi from the office, while our dude panicked about seeing someone from the workplace outside. The lady's eyes widened and immediately assumed that they were together, a conclusion that she voiced out loud, but our dude suddenly apologized that he was in a hurry and zoomed off before the situation could get even more awkward, much to the junior's gaping shock. He ran as fast as he could with his colleague on his back, worried that the junior colleagues would misunderstand and think that they were dating. They managed to make it home and he collapsed inside of their house with a relief. Oblivious, his roommate apologized for being heavy after all. However, our dude explained that he carried her because he wanted to anyway while sweating buckets of exhaustion. Leaving that aside, their junior Nishi-san was surely suspicious about their relationship. He worried that she would tell others at work. They were not dating, but they were living together, and that made things complicated. It could be troublesome for Tokimori as well, since she had a perfect image inside the office. He screamed with shock when she suddenly pressed a cold towel to his neck, and he looked up in surprise to find said roommate caring for him with concern in her eyes as she asked if he was all right. He could not help but notice that he could see up her skirt a little and a blush came to his face. Her thighs were so close and he rocketed up to his knees immediately and shouted that he was sorry about the towel. He stared at her feet and recalled that they needed to cool the ankle that she had twisted. However, she was more focused on him and asked if he was worried about what happened that day. He fell silent as he considered her question, and then sighed with his head bowed that perhaps he was overthinking it. The people at their workplace could be mistaken about their relationship. Even so, if weird rumors started going around about her, he would immediately clarify everything because she was a kind person, and she even gave him a room to stay. Her cheeks flushed at his words and she said that if that happened, and weird rumors started to spread, then they could just date for real. Our dude was shocked and speechless. He gasped and said that they could not do that since they were not at that point yet, and things could escalate pretty badly. He had a lot more excuses prepared, but she had already fallen asleep on the floor since her HP had gone down considerably. The next day, on Friday, he remarked that he was glad that her injury was not that bad, and she thanked him for his assistance. Not much had changed from how she was yesterday, when suddenly someone greeted them. It was Nishi Yukako, the junior who had caught them the other day. She chuckled and said that they were surprised, and that she did not think that our dude was such a simp for their dearest Tokimori. Our dude was shocked and speechless at the conclusion that she had come to, and they both could not believe that he had just been called a simp. The girl laughed and went on to say that she did not think that he would carry her home like he was her little puppy. Even though they entered the company in the same year, she could not stand seeing their senior's gorgeous beauty as well, and she also gushed over it. She hugged the reliable senior and giggled that it was as expected of them. While our girl laughed it off, our dude could not believe that she saw them that way. It turned out that their secret relationship was not exposed for now. The next day at work, the big bosses looked at the calendar, and one of the workers said to Chief Sekuda that it was impossible to clean everything before they started to work. There were 30 minutes left and he had said that they were supposed to keep things in order on a daily basis. However, the workers were busy every day and it was hard to keep things clean. So, they organized their regular cleaning in the company and carried boxes and huge files to their proper places. The junior Nishi struggled with the load in her arms and it looked like she was about to fall, when suddenly, the shiny senior stepped in and picked up a parchment. She smiled and encouraged the junior, saying that she could do it and that she just needed to do a little more. The junior watched her in awe and asked if she was okay. The shiny senior just laughed that she was carrying little things. As expected, the entire Tokimori fan club started gushing over her, thinking that she could do anything. However, back at home, that was not the case at all and she was slumped on the bed, deeply asleep. It was rest day the next day, and she was still snoozing at 11 in the morning. It was already midday and our dude peeked in to see that she was still deeply asleep. Suddenly, she arose like a Japanese ghost and he gasped in shock. He called out to her in worry and her eyes were dizzy as she apologized to him. They had agreed to clean that day and she wanted to help too. Still dizzy, she tried to quickly put on her clothes, even as he told her not to rush. She tied her shirt up appropriately and he asked if she could wash the bathroom. She agreed that she could since he was always doing it. It was something both of them used, so she wanted to try to do it too as she stylishly tied her hair up. He blushed as he looked at her adorable fit and noted that she had said it again. She sure was conscious of him and he blushed that she had said us, laughing like a love-sick puppy. Suddenly, he froze when he heard her scream and raced over to see if she was okay. He found her mostly whole, but wet from top to bottom as she squatted beside the bath. Her shirt had gotten gone and become see-through, exposing huge and bountiful melons. She apologized that she forgot to turn off the shower and apologized for being a bit clumsy. She got to her feet and he could only stare and gape at how wet she was. Then he yelled that if she was okay, then everything was great and that if something happened, she could please call him. Then, he bolted out of there immediately before he saw more than he should have seen. He found his way back to cleaning the floor and he scrubbed hard as he tried to scrub away his dirty thoughts. He told himself that they were just cleaning, but that was just way too stimulating for him and he had to leave for his own safety. He cheered himself on, focusing only on cleaning and cleaning his mind. He activated hyper-speed floor cleaning and scrubbed with the power of purity. 30 minutes later, she was finally done with cleaning, and he popped into the bathroom to see that she had also scrubbed the energy out of herself. Even though she was tired, she had still worked very hard and he thanked her for all her hard work. He put a towel around her shoulder but was surprised when she raised it to him. She smiled and said that he had also worked hard. A blush blossomed on his face at her kind words. He laughed that he would do the rest of the cleaning and she could rest for a moment. Then, he laughed and hopped away, saying that they would continue later. Then, he hopped away then paused when he saw all sorts of wet footprints down the hall. The bathroom floor ended up shinier after another round of dedicated cleaning. A certain rest day, our dude received a package that was for his beautiful angelic roommate. He went inside to look for her, calling out to tell her that a package had arrived for her. Of course, she was once again passed out on the couch. It was the first time he had seen her relaxing in such an odd position, and he wondered if he should leave the package on the desk. Suddenly, she arose with a groan, much to his surprise, and said that she wanted to open it. He squealed that he could open and that she could take her time. He did not want her to force herself to get up. It turned out to be a puzzle, and she brightened up when she saw what had arrived. A white puzzle had arrived and every piece was completely white. It looked difficult from the start, but she really wanted to try it. She said that if he was interested, they could even do it together. He was surprised and asked if that was fine with her. It seemed more like they were a couple than co-workers. She skipped away to get ready, and he nervously wondered if something would happen again. However, she returned with glasses, suddenly rather serious, and said that a puzzle was a battle against time, and that they should aim to do the 180 pieces in 5 hours. He watched her in awe as it was the first time he had seen her wearing glasses. She quickly got to work and started connecting the corners and the edges first. Then she asked him to get started on the short areas, and he also got busy. The situation turned out much different than he had thought, and he realized that it was like they were back at work. She studied the puzzle piece that she held seriously, and he watched in amazement how she was bright and alert even though they were at home. He happily got to work doing his own part to contribute to the puzzle and was excited when he'd finished it. He held up the finished product to her after 1 hour of work and marveled at how much she had already completed within the same hour. He called out to her nervously and she turned, apologizing for not noticing him, even though he was very earnestly helping her. She blushed and said that he must feel bad since she did not reply him, but he just blushed. He shook his head and then beamed that he thought that it was wonderful that she was serious about the things that she liked. He also said that he would try his best, and she beamed. They got busy on the puzzle, and a few hours later, the puzzle was finished and they both blushed with happy and joy-filled glee. She threw herself at him in a very happy hug, and he felt her melons pressing against his chest. He shook as he realized that her melons were touching him. Now, she was sleepy and she rubbed at her eyes. He asked if she wanted a coffee and shakily reached out to grab the cup of beverage that was across the puzzle. He carelessly knocked it over and he cried out as the cup titled and spilt its contents all over the pure white puzzle. The puzzle had gotten drenched and our dude panicked, instantly wanting to apologize. However, his roommate reached out and touched his head. With a gentle pat, she reassured him and told him not to worry. It was more important to her that he helped her, and he responded to her happy blush with a blush of his own as he was moved by her words. She happily said that they could do a 1,000-piece puzzle next time, and he was baffled by her enthusiasm. They ended up framing the dirty puzzle as it was, and she gleefully pointed out that a cat shape had been formed by the coffee. At work, someone on the phone shouts in realization, while on the phone, that something will be happening that day. Company wanted to get the goods delivered ASAP, but it was impossible because they were yet to finish the revision. Suddenly, Tokimori raised her hand and offered to help her panicking seniors. The senior was grateful for her assistance and she blushed happily when she looked at our dude. He could not help but think that she was so trustworthy, and he hoped that she did not push herself too much. Later, that evening, he heard the front door open. He headed out to welcome her home, but froze in horror to find her sprawled on the floor and fast asleep as usual. He asked if she was okay, and she confessed that she was at her limit. He picked her up and asked her if she wanted to rest in her bedroom. She was half asleep as he half carried her, and blushed when her melons pressed against him. She mumbled that he must be so tired, but he insisted that he was fine. He pointed out once again that she worked harder than anyone, and if he could help her, then he wanted her to let him do it. He dumped her in the bed and told her to wait for a moment, and he turned soon, just to find her laid in a really lewd position on the bed. He panicked, but used his inside voice when he told her that he had brought a change of clothes. However, with watery eyes, she confessed that she could not change and begged him to help her. He blushed, wondering if she wanted him to change her clothes. He came over and pulled the thighs off her legs. He was flushed with a blush as he worked, and soon her foot slipped free. She was still snoozing like everything was natural while he was sweating buckets. He told himself that he was just taking care of her as he moved to undo the buttons on her shirt. That popped open easily and her inner vest was soon exposed. He said that he would help her, but he asked her to kindly raise her arms so he could help her with the rest. She moved and sat up, raising her arms as requested, and remained blissfully unaware of how gorgeous she was. Our dude was fighting for his life just looking at her armpits. He took a deep breath and told himself to calm down, saying that he was being way too conscious as he helped her put on the oversized shirt. She laughed and thanked him, and he smiled as he told her to have a good rest, relieved that he managed to do it. However, as he was raising himself to a standing position, she suddenly grabbed him and shouted that he waits. Our dude found himself dragged back and he screamed as he ended up falling right on top of her. They both stared at each other, their lips barely apart, and they made intense and prolonged eye contact. Our dude stared deeply into the eyes of his colleague who stared intensely back at him. He sweats buckets and wonders if this is going to be a thing, and she slowly closes her eyes with a blush on her cheeks. Our dude gulps nervously, but he moves in closer. He looks prepared to kiss her. However, she suddenly whispers his name and he jumps back with a shock when she apologizes for pulling him over so suddenly. She mumbled that she was always causing him trouble, and she wondered why he was so kind to her. Our dude stared at her surprised, and laughed that he had no particular reason for being kind to her. He somehow started telling her his sad backstory of how his father died from an illness. His mother then usually collapsed because she overworked herself, and at the time, he had thought that there was no one who was capable of doing everything by themselves. So, if they did things together, then everything would be alright. So, whenever she was tired, he would gladly help her since that was how things were. He laughed and apologized for the long talk, but she shook her head and assured him that it was alright. She smiled and thanked him greatly for talking to her since it made her feel quite happy. He stared at her in shock and then laughed happily that it was good. He quickly told her to have a good night and that she had to rest well. He even handed her a pillow. His roommate seemed a little different from usual, and he guessed that she was tired from working overtime. She lay awake and then said before he left that she liked those things about him very much. Our dude found himself frozen, with her words echoing over and over in his head. Later, he could not help but gush to himself that his gorgeous roommate liked him. Suddenly, he got a call from his sibling and he said that it had been a while, and asked how college life was going. His younger sibling replied that everything was going well thanks to his help. They also added that our dude seemed happy and asked if something had happened. Our dude blushed and laughed it off, saying that it was nothing at all, and he asked why his sibling was calling. His sibling confessed that they planned to stay at his place the next day, and our dude was shocked so speechless that he took a moment to stare at his phone in disbelief. He laughed that it was so sudden, and his sibling explained that he was taking an overnight bus to see him. He tried to tell his sibling to wait, unable to explain his very unique circumstances and his new roommate. At the end of the day, he could explain nothing and his sibling arrived. The young Akaru looked around the city with marvel and amazement at Tokyo, where every trend started. Suddenly, someone called out to him and handed him the wallet that he had dropped. He admired the gorgeous damsel, and was amazed by her beauty. He happily wondered if his brother had a girlfriend when someone suddenly called out. The man called out to the beautiful damsel that she should not go back on her own, and that he was not finished talking to her. She insisted that she did not want to talk to him anymore, and the young boy thought that it seemed like a fight scene in a drama. Tokyo was scary, and he hoped that his brother would come soon. He picked up his phone and called his big brother. Meanwhile, our dude called out to his roommate and told her that he would be going out. However, he got no response and wondered if she had already gone outside. It was rare to see her gone early in the morning, but he told her that if anything happened, she could please call him. He then headed out to a nearby svada since his brother had told him to wait in the svada in front of the station. Suddenly, his brother called out and our dude turned, expecting to his bespectacled younger brother looking the same as he remembered. To his utter shock, he instead found a boy that he did not recognize waving at him and smiling that it had been a while. Our dude was shocked and speechless, and he asked what the heck happened and why his brother dyed his hair. His brother laughed that it suited him well, and that when he went to university, he started trying new things so that he would not regret it later. Whenever he got an idea on his mind, his younger brother was the kind to immediately do it, and our dude considered stopping him. His younger brother then asked him how his new apartment was, and our dude froze for another reason. Then, he carefully explained his new living circumstances, and his younger brother was beyond shocked to find out that he was living with a woman. Our dude had to hurry and cover the mouth of his screaming brother, laughing nervously cause people were staring. He hastily whispered that some things happened and he made a reservation in a hotel so his brother could just go stay there. However, his brother immediately wanted to see his new roommate. Our dude was shocked and his brother went on to beg tearfully that a hotel would feel so lonely and that there were so many people around. He also wanted to make sure that his big brother was not living with a bad person, but he mostly just wanted to see the lady. Meanwhile, our dude figured that she was fine and not bad since she had saved him after all. At any rate, his brother won the argument and he agreed to at least let him say hi. He told his brother to wait outside, and his brother agreed. Our dude headed inside and called out to his roommate. To his surprise, when he opened the door, he found her standing upright with an apron on as she welcomed him home. Our dude was stunned, and she apologized for going out without saying anything. Meanwhile, he could not believe that she was out here using an apron. He told her not to worry about going out without saying anything, and something smelled pretty good. She revealed that she had prepared lunch, and she got a little carried away because she had bashfully prepared a lot of nice dishes. He was amazed and asked her if she did all of this on her own. She just giggled and said that she hoped he liked it. He had thought that she could not make food at all, and suddenly his stomach growled. He apologized that it had looked so delicious, and she picked up a spoon of food and then told him to open his mouth with a really cute look on her face. Our dude was shocked and realized that another thing was about to happen. Nervously, he opened his mouth and took a bite of the food that she fed him. She happily asked him how it was, and he beamed with joy, saying how could it not be good. It was perfection, and he cried a tear of joy. She hurried to do the cleaning, but he offered to help, and she insisted that it was fine. At the very least, she should be capable of doing this, and it was no good if she could not. Somehow, it did not feel like something she would say, and he was surprised. Suddenly, his brother popped in, having been left at the door for so long. Our dude yelled that he asked him to wait outside, but the little bro had already let himself in. He introduced himself and thanked the lady for taking care of his brother. However, he paused in surprise as he recognized her. Our dude was surprised and asked if he knew her, and he did, for a brief moment. He mentioned that he had seen her fighting with a man at a cafe. The brother once again repeats that he had seen our roommate fighting with a man, and he asked what happened. She was speechless, and our dude was also speechless. Then, he rushed to apologize that his brother was being rude. However, his brother added that his first girlfriend had been two-timing him. Women were great actresses, and his brother was also good-looking, so he believed that something was up. He asked where the plates were and revealed that he would be staying with them for that day, and that they should please take care of him. Our dude was shocked by his behavior and asked why he was doing as he pleased, but his roommate insisted that she was fine with it, and that she made a lot of food. It was awkward at the dining table that night, and he wondered what that dude was thinking about. However, a part of our dude also wondered if something really happened with his perfect and shiny roommate. He really did not know anything about her, and it made him slightly nervous. He wondered if it was really okay for his brother to stay since they were using the bed. She just laughed that she could sleep anywhere, as he already knew. He blushed, but she told him to keep it down since his brother was already fast asleep, and she did not want to wake him. She had wanted to tell him something before going to sleep. He was still awake, and he asked what had happened. She wanted to explain what his brother had said. Our dude laughed and apologized about his brother and how he had likely seen something private, but his roommate shook her head. She explained that she thought he would be disappointed, so she wanted to clear things up. He blushed and laughed that there was no need since she probably had her own problems. Besides, as they lived together, he could see how she was doing her best and he was her ally. Her eyes sparkled with love and admiration, and he wondered why she had fallen silent. She then leaned in so that her lips grazed his ear, and she thanked him. His cheeks filled with a blush, and to make things worse, his younger brother woke and suddenly screamed that she was trying to sneak into the bed with them. They both jumped in shock and gaped at the brother who was glaring back at them. He said it was as he thought and that he could not trust the roommate. He hurried out and grabbed his brother with him, saying that they needed to run to the hotel before she drained his wallet. Our dude looked back in surprise, and they left behind his roommate who stared after them. In the end, yesterday, they had stayed over at the hotel, running away from home. The next day, his brother asked if would go to the company, but our dude said that he would return home instead. He had business outside the office that day and the next. His brother waved and told him to take care of himself, and our dude waved as well. Back to the office, there was a lot of typing and our girl watched the clock. She called out, confused as to why our dude had not shown up at work today. A colleague explained that he had work to do in another place that day. She asked Nishi to check the documents for her, and as always, their shiny perfect colleague had finished all her work without issues. However, two office ladies whispered to each other and were surprised to see a typo in her work, which was very rare, even if it was not a big deal. Meanwhile, our girl sat on the floor outside and thought back to the last time she had seen our dude. She recalled watching him run off with his brother, and she reached for her phone and stared at it worriedly. Concern filled her face. Suddenly, it started to rain and our dude groaned as he walked in the rain with an umbrella in his hand. He paused when he noticed something and saw his shiny roommate walking as well in the rain. He realized that she was going in the opposite direction from their home and wondered where she was going. Without thinking, he followed her and saw that as she walked, a blonde gentleman approached her and called her Mizuki. She paused nervously, and he asked her if she would finally be honest with herself. He asked if she was still angry because he had left her, but he did not care at all. He asked her to come back to him and stretched out his hand to her. However, she bowed to him in an apology and explained that she was sorry, but things would not work anymore with him. It was only a few weeks, but she understood that she could not be his ideal woman, and she could not forget what he had said. She recalled how he had demanded for the food, even when she explained that she was so tired. She had even offered to do something fast for him, but he had glared and said that she was just slacking off. He had complained that she was a woman, so she had to be able to cook. He had berated her, saying that housework was a woman's job, and that her slacking off was just her depending on others, and that she was a failure as a woman. She had returned to the kitchen that night to try to cook, and she had cried hard. Back in the present, the dude was unapologetic and said that if she cooperated with him, then they could start things over. He asked her if she wanted to, and she very clearly stated that she had no desire to ever return to him. She apologized to him and explained that she would now delete his number. This enraged him and he suddenly grabbed her hand, even as she yelled at him to stop. However, someone suddenly grabbed his hand and forced him to let go of her. Her eyes widened because that someone was our dude, and he glared at the beautiful man in anger. Our dude wrapped his arm tightly around her and asked the tall guy what he was doing. She looked up in surprise to see him, and the rude jerk asked our dude who he was. He introduced himself as his roommate's coworker, and he just saw that she was in trouble. The man was still unapologetic, and he called our dude an outsider who had nothing to do with her. Our dude glared and said that for some personal reasons, she allowed him to live with her, so he could not overlook what was going on as her housemate. Now, the dude looked at them with condescending eyes and laughed that they were living together. He had wondered why he was so close with her, and he laughed that this meant our dude had something to do with her. However, he said that he used to go out with her, and our dude looked surprised that he had met his roommate's ex-boyfriend. So, this person that she had been meeting was his ex. The foul ex moved in closer and asked our dude how long he had been living with her. He grinned wickedly and said that she was a cutie, but she was very sloppy, and he laughed at her. Just because of her behavior, 1 week had been his limit. She could not do laundry, she could not cook every day, and she always skipped the housework. She was just a failure as a woman, and as he spoke, our girl started looking more and more depressed. However, our dude spoke up for her and said that she was doing the best that she could do. Her tear-filled eyes opened in surprise, and our dude went on defending her. He said that it was no good to load one person with everything that needed to be done, and that she did not have to be the only one to it all. The man looked angry and asked if our dude was saying that he was the wrong one. However, the man had reached out and pushed our dude a little too hard, so his foot slipped a little on the stairs. He fell to his butt on the floor, and she called out to him, rushing to him and asking if he was okay since he had landed in the rain. He said that it was fine and that they had to take cover from the rain, but he was shocked to see tears rolling down her eyes. He screamed and apologized for saying so much without asking her, but she said that the fact that he was the one who came here made her so happy. Even as she cried, joy lit her face up as he stared at her, and she laughed. He could not help but smile with relief that her joy had returned, and he told her not to worry about the things that awful guy had said. As she rubbed the tears from her eyes, our dude noticed that once again they had been standing in the rain divided by. Once again, her shirt had gotten wet, and he gasped as he quickly lent her a coat. She smiled and thanked him, and they held hand, hurrying away so that they would not get wet, so they needed to hurry and get out of the rain. As their hands entwined in the falling rain, our dude blushed. They had both come with an umbrella, but it seemed they had completely forgotten about that as they walked in the pouring rain. The next day, to nobody's surprise, they came down with a cold. Well, our dude was the one with a cold because of the events that happened the other day. He was just rubbing at his nose when the blonde jerk suddenly showed up and called out to him, having still recalled his name. Our dude turned in shock as the jerk asked if he had a moment. Somehow, the blonde jerk started flipping through pictures of girls who were models and were pretty cute. He also found a nurse with a pretty good shape. Our dude was speechless and wondered how things had ended up like this with both of them sitting together at a park bench. The jerk asked our dude what kind of girl he liked, and our dude had coughed and asked the blonde what was going on. The dude smiled sinister-like, and he said that he could introduce him to whatever girl he liked. He could even find a girl who was used to a familial environment, and she would love to be a housewife. So, he wanted our dude to stop his thing with Mizuki, his coworker and roommate. He said that if our dude met another girl, he would surely snap out of his love for his roommate, and that there were plenty lovely girls around. The man's plan was for our dude to meet another girl and betray his ex so that he could go back to her life. Our dude did not look very popular, so the wicked handsome jerk was sure that he would take the bait. However, our dude said to excuse him for a moment and said that his roommate and colleague was a very lovely person. Human beings had a lot of facets, and he knew a lot of those lovely sides of his roommate. The blonde jerk was shocked, and he recalled that he had been told that he was good at dealing with people, but frankly speaking, he did not seem so funny. He had been annoyed that someone would dare insult him to his face, and had asked our girl to take a plate. She had smiled back then and had thanked him, calling him nice. Now, the wicked jerk was silent, and our dude somehow told him that he was really kind. He was going to add something else, but he noticed that the jerk had fallen silent. The jerk called Haruto, asked our dude what he even knew about him, and he told our dude to stop it already. He did not want to waste his time, so he stood up and walked away with a wave of his hand. Our dude watched him leave when suddenly his phone rang. Our dude pulled out his phone and it was his brother who was asking if it was fine to call right now. Our dude groaned and asked his brother if he was in Tokyo again. Fortunately, he was not, but he did have some big news. The brother revealed that his girlfriend had not cheated on him after all, and that his birthday was already so close, so she had been looking for a present for him with her cousin. Our dude sighed as his brother went on to say that he was glad that he had been wrong. He cried that love was truly amazing while his girl laughed at him. Meanwhile, our dude was thinking that his brother was very loud. His brother said he would apologize the next time they met, and he said he would ask how things were going with his roommate the next time he saw our guy. For a moment, our dude was speechless, as he had not imagined that things with his roommate was anything more than just living together. A blush filled his face and he covered his mouth about his brother still having the wrong idea. He was sure that from his roommate's point of view, he was just a simple coworker and helper. He entered the house and found her somehow laying on the floor using her phone in front of the front door like a cat. She beamed that he had finally come back home, and he blushed that she had been waiting for him. She got to her feet in relief, and suddenly their feet moved in real close together. His bag of groceries fell to the floor, and she pulled him into a big hug, thanking him for yesterday. He gasped with his mouth agape and a blush on his face. Somehow, his eyesight began to fade and she watched him in concern as our dude suddenly slumped in her arms. His face had gone red, and the cold had finally caught up to him. The next day, our dude checked in with a thermometer, and sure enough, he had caught a cold, just as he feared. He sniffed sadly and figured that it had happened surely because he had gotten wet the day before yesterday. Although, he was glad that it was him and not his beautiful roommate. The door opened then and in stepped his beautiful roommate with a bowl of food on a tray, and she asked him if he was okay. A blush flooded his face, and he sat up with a gasp, saying that she was supposed to be at work. However, he was not feeling too well, and he seemed to be having a rough time, so she had gotten worried and had asked to work from home. She seated herself on the bed beside him and beamed as she held the bowl of food in her hands. She said that today she was going to take care of him. He blushed and thanked her for her care. She happily asked if he was hungry and that she still had some time until work, so she made some porridge. She happily blew on the spoon of food before her and raised the bowl for her to eat. She told him to open his mouth and brought the spoon closer to him. He was nervous as she approached, and his face got heated the closer she came. Just before she could feed him, an alarm went off, and it was the alarm that he set 10 minutes before work. She got up and told him that if anything happened, he should please call her for help. He sat with the bowl of food in his hands and knew that he was supposed to be tired. But he felt so happy in that moment, and his cold filtered only the most beautiful and happy pictures of his perfect roommate in his memory. At least, he would try to leave the dishes, and he opened the door. He looked up in surprise when he got to the kitchen and saw her busy at her computer. His shiny roommate was busy typing away so seriously at a desk, and she pondered for a moment on how to answer a question. He blushed as he watched her and wrapped his scarf around his neck. He was determined when he lay back in bed and wanted to get well quickly so that he could go back to helping his wonderful roommate. Later in the night, he was covered in sweat and he groaned. He had fallen asleep and he was sweating a lot. It also felt kind of chilly. He felt a hand by his side and looked up to see his roommate hovering over his sleeping body. He gasped and jerked at seeing her there. She explained that if he was sweating then she had to dry his body. He insisted that he could do the front by himself, so she carefully watched him. While he was busy with his front, she worked at his back, and he could feel her hands on his body. He felt that it might be dangerous because she was so close to him. However, she looked happy to be pressed close to his body. She leaned in real close and he blushed at feeling the press of her melons. In the quiet dark, she said that she hoped that he would get over his cold soon. He blushed really hard at her sweet words, then realized that she had suddenly fallen asleep on his back, all cuddled up to him. He gaped at her sleeping face and scolded her that if she did not sleep on the futon, she would catch a cold. However, she just kept sleeping. While he was taking care of her once again, he completely recovered. In the office, our dude greeted the staff a good morning as usual, but he walked in to see their junior colleague embracing his roommate and begging her to save her. The junior whined that she was assigned to train new employees and that she cannot take on that responsibility. Suddenly, someone classy-looking walked in and the junior gasped that she was there. She was Igarashi Azusa, the new rookie. It seemed that she used to work in advertising at her previous workplace, and if one left an opening in their guard, she would turn out to be a dangerous woman. She happily greeted them and called out to a part-timer, saying that she had to fix an issue this morning. She called out to our guy and asked her if he could do some paperwork for her, but he declined as he had a meeting that he had to attend, so he did not have any time. However, she did not listen to him and she just left the paperwork in his hands, telling him to give them to her once he was done. The junior whispered that he had gotten hit by her, and that she was always finding reasons to avoid boring tasks like checking data. She just liked to take the credit at the end and submit them. Our dude sighed as he looked at the paperwork in his hands, but his roommate came over and very firmly said that he did not have to do it. She called out to the new hire and said that she would be in charge of the day's training. She hovered over the new lady's shoulder and gave her proper directions on everything that she had to do. She told her to make her work flashier, and that it was easy to modify if she registered and could save some time. The new hire sighed and said that she did not understand. Wanting to get out of work, she groaned that she wanted to remember, but it was hard for her. Our girl smiled and said that working was not about doing things all alone, and that to reach their achievements, they were developing new ways of doing their work. If anything happened, she could always ask anyone around for direction, and she left the new hire to it. Then, the lady stomped her feet with rage and gritted her teeth in annoyance that she had not been able to escape work thanks to the perfect and shiny employee. That night, our dude told our girl that she had done great work that day, but he had to ask if she was okay. She lay on the couch and groaned that she could not move. She seemed even more defenseless than usual, but he smiled. He told her, as she rested on her back, that she had seemed very cool that day. He was proud of her for defending him, and he was also grateful. When he had a cold too, he had never thanked her for her assistance. If he could do something for her, he would happily do anything that she asked. Suddenly, she rolled over and stretched out her hand to him, much to his surprise. With a blush on her cheeks, she asked if he could kindly massage her aching hand. A blush filled his own cheeks, but he had already offered to help. He took her hand and marveled at how soft it was. He also wondered if it was okay for him to do this. He rubbed more at her hands and gasped when he noticed the deep blush on her cheeks, and she mumbled that she was all right now. With great alarm and a huge blush on his cheeks, he pulled away and mumbled that he hoped she would have a good night's rest. He might not be able to sleep since he was able to touch her beautiful soft hand. Meanwhile, the horrid new employee was plotting and she sent out something troublesome. Back at the office, everyone is very busy and many people are answering phone calls from various customers. They are in a very tough season and everyone is running around. The boss calls their perfect employee and tells her to come to the conference room since they have to talk. She is surprised, but she came as instructed, and the boss read out the review for the training of the new employee that she had handled the other day. The junior had complained that she had been taught nothing and that she had been scolded for her mistakes. That was the report that the boss had received, and he asked her if she knew anything about it. Her eyes widened and she nervously said that she knew nothing about it. So, he said that he understood and he was going to speak to other staff to confirm or deny this. He asked if there was a problem and she said that there was no problem. She stepped out of the conference room feeling a little dejected when someone loudly greeted her and complimented her work. It was the evil snake of a woman and she was beaming in wicked glee. She thanked our girl for all of her hard work that day, and our girl thanked her as well and walked away. The wicked snake grinned and loved that the star looked depressed and felt pathetic. This was what she deserved for messing with her. Later, our dude was called, and the boss decided to ask him about the report he had received since he needed a third opinion. Our dude looked through the report and then spoke up. He defended her and said that there was something wrong because our girl did not act at all as the report said. Her eyes widened in surprise and the wicked lady got annoyed. She raced over and tried to influence our dude's words, saying that the report said differently. However, he pointed out that the wicked lady had been the one to write the report. He pointed out that there were a lot of typos, and for a moment, everyone was shocked and speechless. The chief coughed and told the employees to focus on her own work, and that she should check those spelling errors. Our dude hoped that this meant that everything had been solved. He felt a gentle tug on his shirt and turned to see that Tokimori was gratefully thanking him silently. She thanked him with tears in her eyes and a blush on her cheeks that he mirrored. Then, someone called for her help and she happily rushed over to help. He watched as she left, blushing all the while. Later, the lady was angrily left to do her own work, and she groaned that everything about data check was so boring, and that it was so tedious. Suddenly, someone called to her. It was the big boss, and he smiled to ask her if she was free and if he could entrust her with a new project. She was excited and said that she was all ears, and left her desk happily to go talk with the boss. Later, she was asked if she remembered to save the date, and she was not sure what that was. However, she decided that it did not matter, and she said that it was fine. So, she was permitted to leave, and her colleagues told her that she had done good work. However, she had not saved the data, and in 30 minutes, the data was cleared. The next day at work, she came in looking all fashionable as usual to find out that everyone was in a panic, and she asked what had happened. They had yelled that they had been waiting for her, and they asked her for the data for the nationwide event that they had been working on since the beginning of the year. It had all disappeared from the cloud, and if they did not print it now, they would have no time. They asked if she knew anything about this, and she stared in shock because she had not cared enough about it. They yelled that if they did not print the data by today, they would have no time, and they asked her if she had altered the data. She stared and wondered why they were asking her such questions when she would not know that. Suddenly, she recalled when her colleague had asked her if she had saved the data before she left work the other day. Her eyes widened in realization, and they quickly asked if she had something in mind. However, she was frozen as she had not realized the data she had lost was important, and she did not want to get in trouble. She then lied and said that someone told her to leave it as it was, and that person was Tokimori. She lied that a client also came, but before she could continue with any more of her nonsense, her senior cut her off with the accurate conclusion that she had left it without saving it. Her senior called her irresponsible and that she could not trust her to get anything done. She was horrified now that everyone was upset with her, when suddenly, Tokimori rushed in and apologized for being late. The other lady complained and asked why our girl was so late during this type of emergency, but our girl just responded by pulling out her flash and handing it to the annoyed senior. She smiled and said that she had kept backup data. Immediately, everyone rejoiced when she revealed that she had kept a USB backup in her house. Suddenly, one of the ladies recalled that our girl was in charge of Igarashi's training and asked how she would take responsibility for her failure. She looked at the lady who was already having a hard time and said that this mistake was all her own fault as her superior. Like a saint, our girl bowed and apologized for any inconvenience that may have been caused. The wicked evil woman was shocked to see our girl take the blame, and she smiled that she could do the follow-up delivery process from now on. Her eyes widened, but soon everyone was quickly back to work so that they could meet the deadline. Time passed by and all the colleagues rejoiced that they had made it. They clapped and cheered and patted each other on the back, embracing Tokimori above all. Suddenly, someone reached for the phone, and it was the lazy coworker who introduced herself to the caller. She mumbled that she was getting transferred to the planning department, and our girl was happy for her. She helped her get ready, and hopefully, that would be the last they would see of her. Later that night, our dude tiptoed in the house. He had heard that a big mess happened that day, and he was sure that she was tired, so he was walking softly, after coming home late, so that he would not wake her. He peeked into the bedroom and saw her fast asleep, and a smile came on his face. He mentally congratulated her on her hard work and tried to cover her properly with a blanket, only to find that she was lying there in her birthday suit. For a moment, our dude was frozen yet again, speechless and baffled. He could see all over, and she was bare, and his brain began to overload. With a scream, he quickly covered her up, his eyes going dizzy from how much he had seen. She was way too defenseless for him sometimes. Tokimori happily watched adorable videos of penguins swimming around in the water, and her face lit up with joy. Our dude watched her, and he smiled that she seemed to be having fun. She said that it was a live stream from an aquarium, and that one could see dolphins and fish move in real time. He happily asked if she wanted to go to the aquarium, and she agreed immediately. However, she groaned that she quickly got tired of walking, and there was no way she could have fun like that if she fell asleep in front of the show glass. She was very saddened by this, and he watched her. Suddenly, he noticed something and said that she should wait a minute. He showed her a few items, and she asked what he was doing with all those materials. He had bought them in a hurry, but this way they could build their own aquarium in the same room. They were selling a planetarium set, but if they drew fish in it and pasted it on the walls, then it would imitate the sea. He did a really quick squiggle and raised it high to show her that it was the ugliest looking penguin in the world. She stared in confusion at the drawing, and he explained that it was a penguin. This way, they could create an indoor aquarium. However, when he turned to her, he found her visibly shaking as she fought to hold back her laugh. He gasped and asked if she was okay, because she finally fell to the floor from the laughter. She later apologized that she laughed too hard as they hung up pictures of sea creatures on the wall. He mumbled that he had never really been an artist, but she was way better at drawing sea creatures than he was. However, she insisted that he just had a really unique art style. She had been about to explode in laughter earlier though. At least, she seemed to be having fun as she happily hung the little animal stickers all over the room. They were done, so they turned on the lamp to heighten the effect and turned off the lights. In the dim light, she stared amazed at the glow of the little lights in the room. She gasped that it was so pretty and that somehow it felt like she was on a date. Our dude had a blush take over his face and she smiled that they should get through the aquarium. The kitchen was the jellyfish zone, and the corridor was like the sea currents where they could see the dolphins. Finally, they saw the penguins, and they were in a straight line, including our dude's very ugly penguin, and he was elated to see the whole family. She laughed that they were so cute while tightly holding his hand, and he blushed, realizing that being with her made his heart race so fast. He wondered how she felt when she was with him, and she asked if she could take his penguin. He was surprised, and she said that she could make it cuter, so he agreed and she cheered. He smiled, having never thought that he would be so happy, and he hoped that they would do it again. The next day, he found his penguin on the back of her phone for everyone to see, and she happily showed it to all their coworkers. They nervously asked her what it was, and she happily said it was a penguin, though one of them thought that it was messed up. The junior Nishi gaped in amazement at something she was watching on a cell phone, and she asked the identity of a particular man. The proud and not so evil anymore colleague said that he was her personal trainer and her friend. They hung out a lot, and he was famous for winning many bodybuilding contests. The junior was amazed by his strong muscles, and she loudly asked Tokimori what she thought about him. She smiled and said that the people who trained were so cool. Every man in the office was alarmed when they heard this. Her two biggest male fans even pledged to sign up for a nearby gym, and that they would only eat chicken so that they could grow muscles. Later that night, our dude could not help but linger in front of the mirror as he stared at his flat chest. He sighed and bent his head, recalling that she had said that people who trained were so cool. If he changed, he wondered if she would notice him then. The next morning, he was busy doing some stretches when she walked in and asked what he was doing. He froze in embarrassment and then blushed and said that he had not worked out recently. So, he had thought about stretching before doing some muscle work. She smiled that it sounded good and that she would do it too. He was surprised but said that they could do it together, so, carefully, she tied up her hair. She got changed into workout clothes and really short shorts and apologized for keeping him waiting. She beamed since he wanted to try doing some exercises together. He agreed and figured that this would be fun. Later, they started to stretch and she had to call out to our dude if he was okay because his body was really going through it. He shook and cried mentally that it was tougher than he thought. He stretched her and was amazed that her body was so flexible. They continued doing stretches and exercises and she stretched him every which way. His body strained and groaned and he mentally cried for mercy. 30 minutes later, he was completely exhausted and he groaned that he might have softened a bit. Then, he beamed and asked if they should do muscle work. However, he was surprised to see that she was half passed out on the floor. She mumbled that she had gotten tired just from stretching and apologized that she no longer had any energy left. She had thought that they could do it if she tried her best, but it had not been enough. However, he grabbed a towel and told her that even if she thought she could not do it, it was amazing that she still tried to do it. She stared at him in awe and he beamed at her, saying that it was his first time doing something like this too, so they would do it step by step. She smiled with a blush and agreed with his words. He said that he would try doing some sit-ups, and she offered to hold his feet. He was pleased, and even if it was just a little, he wanted to show her his cool side. He opened his eyes in surprise when he saw her sweaty and holding down his feet, beaming at him and telling him that he could do it. His eyes zeroed in on her melons and he realized that he could not do it after all. He gasped and said that he thought it would be better if he went running. He jumped up to his feet and she told him to have a safe trip. He ran and told himself that he would not go back until he had calmed down. An old lady cheered him on, and the next day his muscles hurt a lot. That day at work, the lazy lady was glowing and the junior was checking her bangs in the mirror. One of the dudes asked our dude why the ladies were taking so much care of themselves, and our dude revealed that it was because there was a photo shoot for the pamphlet renewal. The cameraman was always traveling and the junior called for her perfect senior. She whined that the photo shoot was about to start but she had not even done her hair. But the perfect senior just fixed her hair with a pin and said that she looked cute like that. Our dude smiled and the cameraman arrived. It was his pleasure to meet them, and he introduced himself as Demichi the cameraman. His camera was the latest one on the market and he had recently bought it. Our dude asked the cameraman to take the photos according to the list, and our girl watched him in admiration. She ruffled his hair to his surprise, and she smiled that his hair was so fluffy and cute, unable to help herself. He thanked her and the cameraman somehow focused his lens on her behind. He stared at his camera, but he soon got to work and quickly took pictures of everyone at the office. After that, he told them they had done a good job. He then told our girl that he would love to take more photos of her, and he told her to pose like a serious big sister. She stood nervously as he continued to take photos and asked her to smile. He kept asking her to take all sorts of pictures, and that she should use the keyboard while standing up. He took pictures of her legs, and she closed her eyes in discomfort. Finally, our dude put a firm hand on the cameraman's shoulder and asked him what he was doing. She was shocked and he glared, telling the cameraman that he was not allowed to take photos that were not on the list. The cameraman was angry and he muttered that our dude should not try acting cool, and he stormed off in anger. Later, in the kitchen, he asked her if she was alright and she assured him that she was fine. She also apologized for making him worry since she had not said no clearly enough, and it was her bad. Our dude stared at her and said that she was wrong. Thinking about it, she had wanted to say no but she had been afraid. However, he insisted that she had done nothing wrong. Tears welled up in her eyes and her vision got blurry. He apologized quickly and said that he did not mean to. Suddenly, someone pushed him and took a picture of them in an indecent pose at the office with her staring into his eyes. The cameraman laughed wickedly that they were having an office romance. The disgusting man smiled like the evil lech that he was and he grinned wickedly as they both stared at him. Our dude stared in shock at the evil cameraman who had taken an indecent photo of the two of them. He laughed that they had a weird relationship and asked if the company was aware of it. Our dude realized that the cameraman had pushed him. However, the evil man laughed and said that their boss had to check all the photos that had been taken that day, so they were both in trouble and our guys looked stunned and speechless. He laughed and said that they should be careful that this photo does not get mixed up with the rest. The man walked away and she assured our dude that she would explain everything. She stared at him with hope in her eyes, and he knew that it was true that their relationship had changed recently. However, if that picture was spread across the company, everyone would think it was an office love affair. This would be bad for his female colleague, and our dude worried. Today was so exhausting, and perhaps he had gotten a bit carried away. He smiled that it was okay to have some delivery from time to time, and he laughed that he had not had pizza in ages. She watched him as time passed by, and they eventually went to bed. Still, our dude could not sleep and he found it difficult when he closed his eyes. She suddenly appeared beside him in his end to snuggle with him. His eyes opened in shock and thought that perhaps she was coming in a bit too close, much closer than the usual. He asked if she was not a bit too close, and she apologized for waking him. She said that the mood seemed different during dinner. She had thought this was okay and he realized that she was worried about him. She rolled in closer and wrapped her arms around him, pressing their bodies close together. She pressed really close and his eyes widened. She said that they could feel more relief if they hugged each other, but a blush stained his cheeks. It was true and he was more distracted from his worries, but with all of her soft parts pressing into him, he would not be able to sleep. The next day, the boss called our dude and asked if he had a moment. He wanted our dude's help in sorting the photos. He saw a lot of great pictures and both our dudes looked worried as the boss continued to sort them out. Finally, the boss pointed out a photo that he wanted to talk about, and it was one with our girl smiling while our dude talked to her. The boss said that it gave great vibes in the workplace between men and women, and that it was a great photo. Our dude was wondering what happened to the blackmail photo when someone asked for a favor. It turned out that the representative of the photo studio was the boss' niece, and she had been checking the photos they had taken. She had asked if our girl was interested in being her model, and everyone was surprised. They had gasped in shock and awe at the thought of their best girl becoming a model.